Hey folks, in this episode I'm going to show you how to make this proximity ripple effect in Blender. It's going to be using two components. We're going to be using geometry nodes and the shader editor to achieve this. You can use this effect for several different things such as water, portals and an array of other use cases, as you can see by these examples. So without further ado, let's get to it. So open up Blender. I'm going to delete the default cube. I'm going to delete the default lamp. I'll then hit Shift A, go to Mesh, and we choose Plane. I'm going to tab into Edit Mode. I'm going to hit S2, hit Enter to scale it up by 2. I'm going to right click and I'm going to select Subdivide. And on the bottom left here with this menu, I'm going to choose 16 cuts. I'll then click this arrow here and collapse these options here. I'll tab out of Edit Mode, and in my outliner, I'm going to rename the plane to Proximity Ripples. I'll then hit Shift A, go to Mesh, and I'm going to choose Monkey, good old Suzanne. In fact, I'm going to select this plane here. I'll just tab into Edit Mode. I'm going to hit S2, scale it up by 2 again. I'll right click and I'll choose Subdivide. I'll increase these options and I'm going to subdivide it one more time. Something around there. Excellent. I'll just tab out of Edit Mode. I'll select Suzanne. I'm going to hit G, Shift Z, and that will grab it on every axis excluding the X axis. Hold down Control to snap it to the grid. I'll bring Suzanne over to there. I'll then go over to my modifiers. Over here, I'm going to click Add Modifier. I'm going to go to Generate and I'm going to choose Subdivision Surface. I'll then apply that modifier. Right click and Shade Smooth. I'll then hit Shift A, go to Mesh, and I'm going to select UV Sphere. I'll hit G, X, hold down Control, snap it to the grid. I'll just bring it over there. These are just going to be for demonstration purposes only. I'll right click and click Shade Smooth. I'll shift click and select Suzanne. So we've got the UV Sphere and Suzanne selected. I'm going to hit M for Move, and I'm going to add a collection, and we'll call this Proximity Objects. I'll then click this arrow button and that should move those two objects into the Proximity Objects collection. Excellent. I'll select the Proximity Ripples plane. I'm going to take my cursor to the bottom left until I see a crosshair. I'm going to left click and drag and open up a new window. I'll then change this window from 3D viewport to shader editor. I'm going to click New to add a new material, and I'm going to rename this material to Proximity Ripples. I'll hit N to hide the N panel. I'm going to zoom in. I'll take the principal BSDF and I'm going to hit delete. I'm going to go over to here to my vertex data, and under color attributes, I'm going to click add, and we want to add a color under vertex color and make sure that that's set to black. I'll then click add, and now that's added a vertex color attribute. I'll then hit Shift A, go to input, and we're going to choose color attribute. I'll take my cursor over to here and hover it over where it says color. I'm going to hit Shift C and then zoom into here, Shift V, and we'll paste that in place there. I'm just going to drag this color into the surface of the material output. I'll then flip this from shader editor to geometry node editor. I'll click new to add a new node tree, and I'll rename this geometry nodes to Proximity Ripples. Just drag this up, give us a bit more space. I'll drag this across. I'll then hit Shift A, we'll go to Geometry, Sample and Geometry Proximity. I'll then take my cursor to the outliner and I'm going to drag the Proximity Objects collection into the geometry node structure here. I'm going to set it to relative. I'll then take the instances output and connect it to the geometry input and the distance from the geometry proximity into the bottom socket of the group output. I'll select the group output. I'll then hit N to open up the N panel, and on this sidebar here where it says group, we're going to locate to where it says distance, which is this socket here. I'm going to change it from float to color. We also need to realize the instances to make them physical objects. So I'll just drag this across. I'm going to hit Shift A, go to Instances and Realize Instances, and we'll pop that in between the collection info and the geometry proximity. I'll just drag the group input across. I'll then hit N to close the N panel. I'm going to go over to my modifiers tab over here, and I'm going to drag this socket, the top socket on the collection info, into the bottom socket of the group input, and that should add this here. I'll then hit Shift A, go to Utilities, go to Math, and we're going to choose Map Range. Pop that in between the geometry proximity and the group output. The 2 min we're going to set to 1. And the 2 max we'll set to 0. I'll then drag this 2 minimum value from the map range node into the bottom socket of my group input node. I'm going to hold down Shift, right mouse button and drag just to add a noodle point here. I hit G, bring this across. I'll do the same again. Shift, right mouse button, drag, hit G, and we'll bring this across here just so we can see what we're doing. That's all the work done for the geometry nodes. The rest is done in the shader editor. So I'll click this button here and I'm going to change it from geometry node editor to shader editor. Now under the geometry node modifier that we made, we had the output attribute and we'll select color. And now you can see the effect that it's having. As you can see, it is dependent on the resolution of the base mesh. So I'll tab into edit mode. I'm going to right click and I'll choose subdivide. I'll subdivide it one more time. Excellent. tab out of edit mode. I'll hit Shift A, go to color, and we'll choose mix color, and I'm going to pop that down there. I'll then unplug this from socket A and plug it into the factor. I'll just choose 2 random colors for now. So I'm going to set this one to blue. I'll set this one to maybe green. I'll then hit Shift A, go to converter, and I'm going to choose color ramp. I'll pop that in between the color attribute and the factor of the mix color. I'll just drag these values across, something around about there, just so we got a bit more contrast. Maybe I'll increase the shader editor so we can see what we're doing a bit better. I'll just drag this across over to here. I'll hit Shift A, go to texture, and we're going to choose noise texture. I'll set this to 4D. I'm going to bring the detail to 0 and the roughness to 0. Maybe I'll set the scale to 2.5 for now. I'm going to hit Shift A, go to converter, and we'll choose math node. I'm going to change it to multiply. I'm going to plug the color from the noise texture into the top socket. I'll plug the color from the color attribute into the bottom socket and the value output into the factor of the color ramp. And if we change the scale, you can see the effect it's having. Maybe I'll set the roughness to 0.5 for now. I'll then hit Shift A, go to input, and we choose texture coordinates. Shift A, we'll go to vector, and we choose mapping. I'm going to plug the object coordinate into the vector of the mapping node and the vector from the mapping node into the vector of the noise texture. I'll just quickly zoom out a bit. I'll just box select these 2 nodes here. I'm going to hit G. I'm going to drag them across to around about there. I'll then hit Shift A, go to color, and we choose mix color. I'm going to plug the vector from the mapping node into the bottom socket. I'll just select the color attribute node. I'm going to drag that across, and I'm going to drag the color from the color attribute node into the top socket of the mix color node, and I'll plug the result from the mix color into the vector of the noise texture. Let's just neaten these up a little bit. Now I want to be able to animate these ripples. In order to do that, I'm going to add a driver to a value node. So I'm going to hit Shift A, go to input, and we're going to choose value. In the value node, type in hashtag frame and then hit enter, and what that will do, the value should match the frame. So if I hit play, as you can see, so we're on frame 121, it's on 121 on there, skip to the end, 240, excellent. Now I need to add this value into the vector of the noise texture, so I'm going to hit Shift A, go to converter, we choose math, we'll keep it set to add. I'm going to pop this in between the color attribute and the mix color. I'll then plug this value into the bottom socket of the math node. Now if I push play, you can see it's playing, but it's playing way too fast, so we're going to add another math node in between this value to control the rate of change. So I'm going to hit Shift A, go to converter, we choose math node. I'll set this to divide. I'll pop it in here. We'll divide it by 50 for now. Now on this color mix here, if we set it to 1, it's going to be using 100% of the object coordinate vector. So that will be a uniform distortion and nothing happens. But if we reduce this number, say down to 0, and then push play, you can see the ripples are emitting out. So we want a balance between the original vector coordinates and the color attribute proximity coordinates. So I'm going to set mine of a factor of 0.333, kind of the best of both worlds. It depends what kind of effect you want. Some values you might want to consider changing will be the detail, the roughness, and distortion, even the scale. Set the scale to 5. Maybe I'll turn the roughness up to 0.5. Maybe I'll give a distortion value of 0.5, and you can see it has a different effect. Maybe set the distortion all the way up, and it gives completely different results. Maybe I'll hold down Shift, right mouse button click and drag, just hit G just to add a control point here. If you don't have access to this feature with all these control points, just go to Edit, Preferences, and under Search type in node and then enable the node wrangler. Really, this should be enabled by default. So if you enable that, click this button here, click Save Preferences. I'm just going to reduce my distortion to 0. I'm going to reduce the roughness down to 0. I'm going to keep my scale set to 5. Before we continue, it's a good idea to save your file. So I'm going to go to File, Save As. Maybe you can save yours as Proximity Ripples. I'm going to save mine as Like and Subscribe. Thanks folks, you absolute legends. So the idea with this, we're going to use it as a mask. So let's delete this color mix at the end. I'll plug the color into the surface, so it should just be a black and white mask. Now you can use this for all sorts. You can use it to mask out transparency. You can use it to mask out color. You can use it to mask roughness or displacement. I'm just going to make a transparent shader with maybe some distortion and some emission. Maybe I'll just tweak these values a bit, something around there perhaps. I'll hit Shift A, go to shader. I'm going to choose Principled BSDF. I'm going to set my metallic to 0.5. I'll expand transmission. I'm going to set the weight to 0.5. Maybe I'll set the roughness to 0.25. and I'll plug that into the surface of the material output. I'll then hit Shift A, go to shader, and I'm going to choose mix shader. I'm going to pop that in between the principal BSDF and the material output. I'll pop the BSDF into the bottom socket. I'll hit Shift A, go to shader, we choose transparent shader. We'll plug the transparent shader into the top socket of the mix shader. Just drag this up. I'll then drag the color from the color ramp into the factor of the mix shader. Excellent, we've got transparency going on here. I'm just going to box select these 4 nodes. I'm going to hit G, drag them across, Shift A, go to color, and we choose mix color. Maybe I'll set the top socket to kind of a bluish tone, something around there, and the bottom socket to an aqua green, maybe something around there. I'll then plug the color from the color ramp into the factor. I'll plug the result from the mix color into the base color. I'll then hit Shift A, go to vector. I'm going to choose displacement. I'll pop that there. I'll then plug the color from the color ramp into the height of the displacement. I'll then plug the displacement into the displacement of the material output. It won't displace the mesh at the moment because we have to set our material to accept displacement. So go to your material tab over here, and under settings, expand that, and under surface where it says displacement, change it from bump only to displacement and bump. Might go a bit crazy now. Yeah, obviously that's way too much displacement there, so I'm going to change the scale to, let's say, 0.25. And if it's a bit jaggedy, I'm going to go over to our modifiers over here. I'm going to click add modifier, we go to generate, and we choose subdivision surface, and that will smooth that out a bit. Maybe I'll set the render settings to 1. So if I push play, you can see that that's animating. Excellent. Now let's give this a bit more jazz. So I'm going to expand the emission options down here. I'm going to plug the result from this mix color into the color of the emission. I'll then hit Shift A, go to input, and we're going to choose layer weight. I'll pop that down here. I'm going to plug the facing into the strength. Maybe I'll set it to 0.4. I'll then hit Shift A, go to converter, and we choose color ramp, and I'm going to pop that in between the layer weight and the strength of the emission on the principal BSDF. Now I'm just going to drag this black flag across, maybe something around about there, and I'm going to drag this white flag across to maybe something around about there. I'll also select the white, and I'm going to change the value to 10, and that will increase the strength. I'm just going to go over to here to where it says render. I'm in cycles, so I'm just going to preview what I've got in cycles. That's what we've got so far. Excellent. I'll just go back into viewport shading. We don't have to have this color. We can actually change the color. Of course, if I hold down control, right click and drag to disconnect that, and maybe I'll set this to like a purple color, something around there. Let's see what that looks like. We can adjust the weight of the layer weight. So this layer weight is like a Fresnel. It's dependent on the viewing angle. Maybe I'll set mine to 0.5. Maybe I can decrease the strength of that. So I'm going to set it to 5, okay, and I'm going to change the colour to maybe somewhere in between. I'm going to plug my original colours into the colour of the emission. We can drag these flags to expand or contract our mask. Now if we go over to our modifiers, and remember this to min setting, we can increase or decrease the radius to the proximity objects. Go hit play, this is what we've got. I'm just going to disconnect the color ramp from the strength of the emission. Emission strength is set to 0. If you want to render out the animation, I'm going to hit numpad 1, I'm going to hit numpad 8 and hit 8 again. I'll then hit Control Alt 0, and that will align your camera to the view. I'll then select the camera. I'm going to go to object data over here. Under location, I'm going to type in 0 for the X. On the Y, I'm going to type in -5. On the Z, I'm going to type in 2. I'll then go to my camera data over here. I'm going to change the focal length to 24mm, something around there. In fact, maybe I can go back to my object data. I'll just take it up on the Z axis a bit more. I'll then go to my render settings, set it to cycles or EV. I'm going to keep mine on cycles. I'm going to set the noise threshold of 0.025, maybe max samples of 128. I'm going to scroll down till it says light paths. I'm going to disable reflective and refractive caustics. I'll go to my output. I've got my frame rate set to 30 FPS. Choose an output folder where you want to save your movie clip or image sequence. I've got mine set to PNG. Usually I'd set my file output to OpenEXR with a codec of DWAA because that gives you more dynamic range whilst reduces your file size. But for now, I'm just going to set mine back to PNG and then simply hit Control F12 and that will render out your image sequence. That's the tutorial in a nutshell. I hope you found this useful. If you did, please hit like and subscribe. It really helps my channel. Have a great day, level up, and thanks for watching.